Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I think there was some technical problem there, and there is an ongoing battle with T-Series, and they seem to be always jumping up and blocking some of the things. Then later on, they remove that. I hope that T-Series and Facebook wake up to that fact that we always have to dispute that. But anyway, life goes on. Let's move on and let's take a look at some of the news today. First, the federal budget, which we already looked at, but let's have a quick look at that.
Now that the recovery is well underway and the unemployment rate is down to a 14-year low of 4%, it is time to move to that next phase of our budget strategy, and that means stabilising debt and then reducing debt as a proportion of the overall economy. There will be initiatives to address the cost of living over and above what we've already announced.
So with that, there will be new announcements coming in as well. But right now, we'll take a look at this new facility which has been built in Queensland and the facility that is going to be the quarantine centre. Well, it was done quite quickly. And how did the contract go? Who did the contract go to? And what was the process that was followed in doing so?
It's a remarkable story about fast-tracked construction and determination.
We have a reputation at Wagners of getting things done, and we like to do things quickly.
A publicly funded COVID quarantine facility was opened last month on private land at Wellcamp near Toowoomba.
Let me assure the public this facility will be put to very good use.
But the project has been dogged by what critics see as excessive secrecy, with key contracts not going out to tender, hidden behind a veil of commercial and confidence.
It seemed to be a rushed job and rushed opportunity. A private company has just been given the money without any tender. There is competition available in this space.
At the time, it was a reasonable prospect to say we need customised quarantine facilities. We can't keep using hotels. The problem is that because it's a private proposal, all of the money that's being pumped in now, there'll be no guarantee that the government can use it in 18 months' time or 2 years' time or 3 years' time.
And with the federal government putting the finishing touches on its own COVID quarantine facility in Brisbane, the Palaszczuk government has been under pressure to explain why and how much public money it's spending on Wellcamp.
Why should a public facility be in private hands like this?
Well, look, we wanted to build it as quickly as we could, and we wanted it to be of ongoing value.
One of the key concerns, apart from the cost and the need for the project, was how a quarantine facility over 100 kilometres away from a major hospital could provide the necessary health care. 7:30 put that question to the Deputy Premier Stephen Miles last November.
We will address that in the implementation of how we manage the facility and how we staff the facility.
But it is a fair question to ask, isn't it? Where will the staff come from?
Well, the staffing of this facility will be much more efficient than hotel quarantine staffing, which we're currently staffing.
2 months later, the Queensland government finally answered that question.
I've just met some workers at this manufacturing plant here.
The staff will be provided by the company Aspen Medical, which amongst other things was already operating a mask manufacturing facility in Brisbane. Its Wellcamp healthcare contract didn't go to tender, and the details remain commercial in confidence. Just how Aspen Medical secured this deal has been the focus of opposition attacks.
Does the Premier stand by the decision that only one company had the capability to provide medical services at Wellcamp?
Premier, you have the call.
I'm advised by the Deputy Premier that they were the only company that could do that contract.
Speaker.
Aspen Medical is also a client of arguably the most influential lobbying firm in Queensland, Enacta, founded by a Labor Party figure, Evan Moorhead.
Enacta is run by a former Labor Party operative, state director, a member of Parliament, so I am concerned with Enacta.
So there's a problem there because it's clearly creating the perception and the fear amongst businesses in Queensland and citizens in Queensland that the way to get not just a contract from government but an exclusive private contract from government is to go through this particular firm, which, by the way, also happens to donate a fair amount of its profits back to the Labor Party.
It's part of a broader controversy about Queensland's regulation of lobbyists, leading to the Premier last month announcing a review into public sector culture.
This is a small but not isolated incident of the enormous influence of these particular lobbying firms.
The Deputy Premier, Aspen Medical and an actor were unavailable for on-camera interviews, but all of them said no lobbying took place prior to the granting of the Wellcamp contract. A government spokesman said the decision not to go to tender was made after a round of consultations last December. But one private healthcare provider based here in Queensland has told 7:30 he knew nothing about this and is disappointed to have been excluded.
We were capable of providing the services and would have tended to deliver these. I did reach out to the Queensland Health Contract point of contact with an email sent on 26 August 2021, but sadly did not hear back.
A Queensland government spokesperson told 7:30 that the contract would have been too difficult for some providers.
Private health providers were considered but excluded on the basis that they would be required to manage the delivery of increased referral volumes at the peak of the current Omicron surge.
Queensland's Auditor-General has now asked the government to provide information about the Wellcamp development, following a request by the LNP opposition.
Yes, it was extraordinary circumstances, but that doesn't mean the Queensland taxpayers don't deserve to know how much they're spending, or, in this case, possibly being wasted at one particular facility.
Meanwhile, the federal government's Pinkenba 500-bed quarantine facility near Brisbane Airport is due to open mid-year, while the private Wellcamp Centre has fewer than 50 people staying in a 500-bed compound, due to expand to 1,000 beds next month.
It might still be a wise decision to be able to invest in that sort of infrastructure, but we need the transparency in order to be able to learn the lessons about how to make decisions in a crisis like a pandemic.
And figures there are that it's a facility which is about 100 kilometers away from the nearest hospital. It is close to Toowoomba, way away from Brisbane. It was done very quickly. It was done without calling for tenders. The reasoning there was that it had to be done very quickly and that it would have been too hard for some of the other companies. But nevertheless, I think a tender process should have been followed. And of course, there's another facility put forward in Pinkenba, which is by the federal government. So you decide whether it was worthwhile. Now there's 50 people staying in what has the capacity of 500, and that capacity is going to increase to 1,000 very, very soon. So there you are, the facility which is good to have, but whether it's been put to use or whether we'll get good use out of it remains to be seen. Well, right now, let's go to Lismore and see what's going to become of Lismore after all these floods.
3 weeks on, Lismore's CBD is still destroyed and deserted. Its residents in northeastern New South Wales have been left overwhelmed.
Ellie, what are we seeing here? This is the CBD and it was obviously submerged?
Yeah, well and truly. So we're in the CBD, the centre and the heart of our region. The water in this vicinity was pretty much up over the second storey.
Since the 2017 floods, Ellie Bird has headed up Resilient Lismore. It's a grassroots response to natural disasters in the town.
We are resilient as human beings, people are strong, and if they want to make that decision to rebuild or re-establish where they are, then they should be enabled to do that in a better way.
But the clean-up within Lismore is a mammoth task, which could take years.
We need less bureaucracy, less red tape. We need direct support in the hands of people that need it immediately.
Local councillor Ellie Bird says she's grateful for government support, but says it's not arriving fast enough.
If someone loses their home, what are the 3 to 4 things they need straight away?
Well, housing, obviously. So we urgently need temporary accommodation solutions. We need mosquito nets, we need bedding, we need to make sure their homes aren't getting mouldy. Lismore is one of the least insured cities in Australia. Obviously the risk is really high, so many people who live in the flood zone don't have flood insurance because the premiums are out of reach.
What was that rain like? State Labor MP Janelle Saffin has gone further and says the federal government's financial response has not been adequate.
We need the Federal Treasurer to open the chequebook, and I call it our chequebook. I don't know why they were delayed, but there was no excuse to delay them.
In a statement, a spokesperson for the federal government told 730 the government had already paid $604 million to New South Wales residents alone and would be announcing further funding packages soon. How much do you estimate the damage is in terms of a dollar figure?
I'm actually trying not to think about it, to be honest.
Carol Quilty runs the local pub. She says she's been granted $50,000 of disaster relief from the federal government, but she says that will barely cover the cost of demolishing her business, which was completely destroyed.
We're just husband and wife team. We've done quite well to get to the stage, but to recover is probably, it may not be possible.
Because her business lies in a flood zone, insurance premiums are a staggering $150,000 a year. She believes the government should be exploring alternatives for businesses like hers.
I feel the insurance company hasn't really stepped up in this case. I feel that if you make a choice to live in a flood-prone area, you need to pay a little yourself. We need to pay in some way, some sort of levy for disasters.
Insurance is one of the main predicaments here in Lismore. Because most people and businesses by the river aren't insured, it means they're relying on state and federal governments to help them financially and effectively rebuild the town.
It's pretty tough at the moment.
Marilyn Schofield has home and contents insurance, but was quoted $40,000 to add flood cover, which she says she couldn't afford. Her home is completely destroyed.
We're 2 and a bit weeks out. There's still rubbish everywhere. It smells bad. None of us have any belongings left in our houses. We've had to pull walls out, ceilings out. And there needs to be better regulation. So what we're seeing is the haves and the have-nots in the insurance industry. We've all got the right to live somewhere. This is a very close-knit community. None of us have got a lot of money. We don't own a lot of stuff. That's what I own there. And we can't afford to live anywhere else, nor do we want to leave our communities.
Lismore has always been flood prone, but residents have often quarrelled over how to protect the town. The flood levee, an 11-metre wall protecting residents from rising water, was built after a flood in 1989. It was only ever meant to be a temporary fix. The recent flood exceeded the wall by 3 metres. After the 2017 flood, there were 12 reviews into flood mitigation, and a new higher levee was proposed but never acted on.
The whole town's been flooded since I've been here about 4 or 5 times.
Bill Morehouse was formerly Lismore's head civil engineer, and for decades he pushed for greater flood mitigation strategies. He believes a levee isn't the answer.
The only way you can actually get a levee that's going to work is to combine it with some major dams upstream so that they have some flood storage in them to mitigate some of the flood out before it gets down here.
But Bill Morehouse believes that will only be a partial fix. Residents south of Lismore's Wilson River will still be vulnerable to future flood events.
A lot of those are in extreme risk, so we should find a way of buying out most of those houses that they don't have to risk that.
Well, I said story there in Lismore, and levy is not the way. I do agree with the city engineer there, because nature, when you look at water, it'll find its way around. You can't just block that. So there has to be some other solution that's to be reached. Relocating could well work. It could be one of the options, even though it might not be the desirable option for many. Well, right now, good news is that Sydney trains are expected to return to normal by Monday. And I'm told that the union and everyone has come to an agreement. Well, that's such a good news.
A late afternoon emergency meeting and expectations weren't high.
Another day at the negotiating table.
But an hour and a half later, the union boss and the minister emerged together.
It was actually a robust but very positive, energetic meeting. We're all now going to move in the same direction and we're going to try and do what we need to do so we can get our good system up and running.
There's now a promise that train services will run as normal on Monday. That's despite the union still intending to go ahead with a fortnight of industrial action, and its plans are very similar to what led to the government shutting down the network last month.
We've given a commitment we're going to try and pull back on the ones that they were really, really concerned about.
The union too will discuss the possibility of removing all action. As for the fight over free fares on Friday, there's an agreement of sorts.
We both believe that there's probably much better ways of doing business when it comes to fare-free options.
Today's meeting coincided with increased scrutiny over rail projects. The opposition questions whether the metro to the new airport will be ready in time. Boring machines will only get in the ground next year. Then there's an acknowledgement from the government that demands for material and labour could further blow out the construction costs of the metro through the city and southwest. It's just unclear by how much.
We're seeing the impact of Omicron and obviously a tight labour market. That's flowing through to the costs that the government and the taxpayer are required to pay for these projects.
The government needs to get a handle on the transport portfolio and on these major infrastructure projects. At the end of the day, it's not their money.
After the commuter chaos and turmoil within the government over the train shutdown just 3 weeks ago, this was a high-stakes meeting for the Transport Minister. David Elliott appears to have brokered a peace deal for now, and there'll be 6 weeks of intensive negotiations to try to reach a long-term agreement.
Now that I've been...
Term agreement would be good because, these kind of things keeps... of course, they are at loggerheads, but who suffers? It's the commuters, the general public, taxpayers. They are the ones who suffer in this kind of industrial action. Well, right now, international news, and of course, we can't go past Ukraine. So let's hear from the MP, Kira Rudik, who pleads to a no-fly zone over Ukraine.
Kira Rudik, what are things like on the streets of Kyiv at the moment?
So we are at the end of the 35-hour curfew that was implemented because our intelligence got the information that the Russian forces may attack. They indeed attack at the outskirts of the city, where there were fights at the Bucha, Irpin, and Gostomel directions. So it's basically western and northern directions. Russians had three strategies. The first one is to surround the city and to siege it, and this basically didn't happen. However, myself and my team and the other citizens, we had all the water, food supplies prepared and ready for this situation. Second strategy was to do the ground attack. And this actually also didn't happen because they were stopped at the outskirts of the city. And the third strategy was to bombard the city. And this unfortunately happens because even at up to right now, we don't have the closed skies, the no-fly zone that we have continuously requested from our partners. So of three things that they wanted to do, they were able to do one. So there was the most intensive shelling yesterday, and 4 buildings were destroyed and 1 subway station partially destroyed.
So at this point, how important is getting that no-fly zone happening?
So it is critical and vital because right now Ukraine is fighting in 2 dimensions. The first is on the ground, and today is day 21, and I'm proud to inform that we didn't give up any major single city. And second is in the air, and in the air we don't have the ability to fight them back. We don't have enough planes, we don't have enough jets. Yesterday, President Biden announced that Ukraine is getting up to 800 of Air Force protection system. So that could be a great support, and that will not close the skies for us as we really need, but it will give us the chance to fight back, the chance to survive, and the chance to win this war.
How well or otherwise is your resistance holding up on the ground? Because as we know, it's a lot of civilians who've had to take up arms.
So as of right now, there are no active fights inside the city. So we are basically, what we're doing, it's training. And this is why we, every single day that we are getting from Russians, we are using to train and to become better. So we are pretty organized. I am myself on day 21 is much better that I was on the day one, obviously with the rifle and with everything. So we just do take our time to get ready and make sure that this organization, this was basically self-organized. Throughout the country, it was self-organized when the war started. Right now, is becoming like a real part of the army.
Thank you once again for giving us some insight into what you're going through there. We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for that report. Right now, I did play this message in the earlier part of the segment, but it might not have come through. But right now, joining us in our studio is Minister Alex Hogg with a very special message for Holi.
Happy Holi to all Indian Australians celebrating the Festival of Colours. Holi is one of the most vibrant and joyous celebrations on the multicultural calendar, and I thank our large Indian Australian community that has contributed so much to our nation for also putting this colourful celebration right on the national calendar. As an ancient festival celebrating the beginning of the harvest season, the colours and lights of Holi also bring with them the message of renewal and optimism. An especially important message this year as we collectively look forward to the future, confidently emerge from the challenges of the past 2 years. Because there is so much to be hopeful for this Holi. With our borders now open, our families are reuniting, and we are welcoming students, visitors and skilled workers back to our shores. So as you joyfully throw colours at each other and gather with your family and community, let's all look to the new season with hope and with confidence. I wish you all a colourful and joyous Holi and a good health, happiness and prosperity.
And thank you very much for that, Minister. Right now, it's time to go to our daily India report. With that, let's welcome Himanshu.
Welcome to Daily India Report that brings you glimpses of the changing India. In our first story, the Government of India has raised a high alert and is carrying out genomic sequencing aggressively due to a massive rise in the COVID-19 cases in some European and East Asian countries. Indian Union Health Minister Mansukh Mandavia directed officials to maintain a high level of alertness and surveillance and carry out genomic sequencing aggressively in India. The Health Minister's direction came during a high-level meeting he chaired on the issue of resuming scheduled international flights from 27th March, the ongoing COVID vaccination situation and genomic surveillance. Given the rising cases in China, South Korea, Hong Kong, Vietnam, Singapore and some European countries, a high-level meeting was held by the Union Health Minister with senior government officials and experts. The minister has directed aggressive genomic sequencing, heightened surveillance and a high level of alertness. The meeting was attended by Union Health Secretary Rajesh Bhushan, NTAGI Chief Dr. N.K. Arora, Niti Aayog member V.K. Paul, ICMR Director General Dr. Balram Bhargava and AIIMS Director Dr. Randeep Guleria and Department of Biotechnology Secretary Dr. Rajesh Gokhale. Amid a surge in coronavirus cases in China, tens of millions of people were placed under lockdown across the country. Following a continuous downward trend, India's COVID active caseload declined to 32,811 on March 16, 2022. The Union Health Ministry data available at 8 a.m. showed that 2,876 new coronavirus cases were reported in the last 24 hours. Active cases constitute 0.08% of the country's total positive cases. The Health Ministry said that there has been a sustained fall in the weekly and daily positivity rates too. The weekly positivity rate in the country currently stands at 0.44% and the daily positivity rate is reported to be 0.38%. India and Sri Lanka are anticipated to finalize a $1 billion line of credit. This credit from India will assist Sri Lankan President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's government to cope with the island nation's worst economic crisis in decades. Diplomats said India is acting on its policy of neighbourhood first. Earlier, India has extended emergency credit to buy fuel and emergency items. Now, the $1 billion financial aid package will help Sri Lanka make emergency purchases of food, medicines and essential items. This is the focus of Finance Minister Basil Rajapaksa's two-day visit to New Delhi from March 16th. Basil Rajapaksa met Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who said India would continue to stand with the friendly people of Sri Lanka, according to a statement from the External Affairs Ministry. Modi also spoke about Sri Lanka's central role in India's neighbourhood first policy and its security and growth for all in the region doctrine. Rajapaksa is visiting India at a time when the Sri Lankan government has been rocked by protests in Colombo amid demands for the president's resignation for his handling of the economic crisis. This is Rajapaksa's second trip to the Indian capital since December, and he has played a key role in putting together a four-pillar package of Indian support to cope with the crisis. Over the past few months, the Indian side has provided a $500 million line of credit for purchasing fuel and a currency swap of $400 million under the SAARC facility. Aam Aadmi Party's Bhagwant Singh Mann is the new Punjab Chief Minister. Mann was sworn in at a special ceremony. Inderbir Singh Nijjar is the pro-tem Speaker of the State Legislative Assembly. Bhagwant Singh Mann was installed Chief Minister at a massive swearing-in ceremony in Chandigarh on 16th March. Mann said the people of the state took the oath with him to fulfill the dreams of Bhagat Singh and Baba Saheb Ambedkar. Speaking after his oath ceremony, Mann said the new government is, quote, for all. I appeal to you all to not get arrogant. We have to respect even those who didn't vote for us. The AAP is fighting for the values of martyrs. We are the government for all. I thank you all, and AAP convener Arvind Kejriwal. End quote. Mann received a guard of honour at Punjab Civil Secretariat in Chandigarh and was greeted by Chief Secretary Punjab Anirudh Tiwari, Director General of Police V.K. Bhavra and Additional Chief Secretary to CM A. Venu Prasad as he took charge at the CM's office. Mann got a rousing welcome by employees standing around and in balconies when he assumed charge of his office at the Civil Secretariat. After taking charge, Mann, in a short but clear message to the officers and employees, said the people of the state had given a historic mandate and his government will work for pro-people policies. Mann also pledged that the officers and employees will work in tandem for the betterment of the lives of the people, a Punjab government release said. Mann was flooded with congratulatory messages from several leaders across India, including Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Congratulations to Shri @Bhagwant Manji on taking oath as Punjab CM. We'll work together for the growth of Punjab and welfare of the state's people, the PM tweeted. The Government of India restores all currently valid 5-year e-tourist visas given to citizens of 156 countries and regular paper visas to nationals of all countries with immediate effect. The Government of India restored all valid 5-year e-tourist visas suspended since March 2020 because of the COVID pandemic to nationals of 156 countries with immediate effect. Nationals of these countries will also be eligible for the issuance of fresh e-visas for tourists as per existing rules. The government also said it would similarly restore valid regular long-duration tourist visas for US and Japanese nationals as well as permit the issue of fresh visas to citizens of both countries. Foreign nationals on tourist and e-tourist visas can enter India only via designated sea or air immigration checkposts, including those under the Vande Bharat mission or air bubble scheme or by flights as allowed by the Civil Aviation Ministry. The Home Minister said in no case will foreign nationals holding tourist or e-tourist visas be allowed to enter via land or river line borders. The instructions will not, however, be applicable to Afghanistan nationals who will continue to be governed by separate instructions issued by the Home Ministry regarding the grant of an emergency ex-MISC visa. Last week, the government said regularly scheduled international passenger flights outside of air bubble deals would resume from March 27th. The Civil Aviation Ministry said these flights would continue to be subject to rules set up by the Health Ministry for international travel as applicable. India's Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal said that electric vehicles are not a demand but a supply problem today. Consumers want options and the industry must deliver. Indian Minister of Commerce and Industry Piyush Goyal has made clear that mobility is the next frontier in India's fight against climate change. The Indian minister said electric vehicles will also help reduce the country's oil imports and preserve foreign exchange, taking India to the next level of self-reliance. Piyush was speaking at the Auto EV Conclave 2022. There is an ongoing revolution in electric mobility in the world, and the local automobile industry should bring that to India, the minister said. India is keen to support this industry and has already implemented policies like the faster adoption and manufacturing of electric vehicles in India scheme, the production-linked incentives scheme, and a battery swapping policy was in the works, he said. The minister said that the industry had shown good growth over the past 5 years, but that was on the low base and the industry has a long way to go. EVs account for just 1 to 2% of conventional vehicle sales in India. The electric car market in India has grown almost 10 times in recent years. Shailesh Chandra, the managing director of Tata Motors Passenger Vehicles Limited, said while speaking at the same event, as many as 16 states, including Gujarat and Maharashtra, have announced or are on the verge of announcing EV promotion policies, he said. This is helping speed up the transition to EVs in these states. The Indian electric car market could reach around 30,000 units in 2022 and about 70 to 80,000 units the following year, said Rajiv Chhabra, managing director of MG Motor India. In 2021, about 14,000 electric cars were sold in the country. For perspective, about 3 million conventional cars were sold the same year. Demand was not an issue for the segment as much as supply, Chhabra said, adding that the industry was unable to meet the existing consumer demand due to a shortage of parts, including semiconductors. Ajay Devgan has unveiled the first teaser for his upcoming film Runway 34, co-starring Amitabh Bachchan and Rakul Preet Singh. The film is slated to release in theatres on April 29th. Bollywood action superstar Ajay Devgan is yet again back with another intriguing drama post the success of his last OTT release, Rudra. The makers have dropped the teaser of his next film, Runway 34, where he shares screen space with megastar Amitabh Bachchan and Rakul Preet Singh. Runway 34 is helmed by Ajay Devgan and features Boman Irani, Angira Dhar, Akanksha Singh, Carrie Minati in key roles. The movie is slated to release on April 29th. The captivating teaser begins with Rakul and Ajay's visuals from the flight's cockpit where they strive hard to fly an aircraft amid thunderstorms and heavy turbulence. With several passengers on board, the two seek help from the team, but it seems they fail to get any. And towards the end, they seem to break a protocol while taking their stance on the situation. Followed by this, a visual shows the legendary actor Amitabh Bachchan playing the role of an officer, questioning Ajay about what happened while he was flying the plane and taking complete cognizance of the entire matter. That's all for this bulletin of Daily India Report.
Some precautions going on the ships and off the ships. Of course, the ships have medical staff on board as well, and if someone is seriously ill and they are on the east coast, we will be able to transport them to a hospital. So, look, it's early days, but the cruise ships have restarted in other parts of the world, and some of them are going quite well. So, we're starting off slowly and building up.
Is there government funding JV trades?
Oh, hang on. Is there any other questions for anyone else about cruise ships? Because we can let them go, and I'll just keep Sterling in case there's any other questions.
Do you expect some big celebrities to come on the cruise boat?
I hope so. Let's get them here. Sorry?
Who?
Well, let's start with George Clooney and Julia Roberts. I think they've been on the Gold Coast recently. Would it be lovely to see them? Look, that's up to the cruise ships. I'm quite sure they have entertainment. There's lots of things for people to do, and you know, it's a fantastic experience. Having been on one myself, at that stage I thought it was my first and last cruise, but obviously now they're back, and I know that my parents are going to be very excited to be able to go cruising again. Okay, we'll let everyone else go, and Stolly might just stay in case there's any questions. Yes?
So is the government funding Jackie's transport okay?
What I can say is that there are legal indemnity guidelines that are available to former ministers. These are actions that are taken part of their former ministerial duties, and I can confirm that yes, she is.
How much money is that?
Well, we can't say that at the moment. That is part of the legal indemnity guidelines, but also to those costs aren't worked out until the end of the court case. So as you can appreciate, there is a court case that has been confirmed now by the court, and I cannot comment on that court case. No, the legal indemnity guidelines apply for you in your capacity. So, for example, remember there was the floods inquiry all those years ago, and people had to come and appear, and also, the health payroll inquiry. So they are coming back, not as private citizens, they are coming back because they held those positions at that particular point in time. So I think everyone just needs to be very clear about that.
About trying to stop the report coming out as opposed to any questions about her actions.
Look, that's a matter for her. I can't comment on that. What I have to say is that there are legal indemnity guidelines that are available for all sides of politics. My understanding is that they operate in other states and they also operate at the federal level.
Have you read some of the report now and you thought that
Yes, I have. I am actually quite busy as Premier, so I do have a lot of reports to read. I was actually reading a report about the Japanese encephalitis. I'm also working on letters to go to the Prime Minister about getting Category D funding. I also chaired a Cabinet Budget Review Committee yesterday. So yes, I did read the report. I've had a thorough read of it, and I'm quite sure that other people have read it as well. Now, what we do know that these matters have been canvassed at length, they have been examined at length, and there is no findings of any corrupt conduct. Having said that, let me also make it very clear that those practices were not good practices. Those practices now do not happen. Sorry? Well, the communication, okay? So the communication and the use of private emails. So since that time, there have been a lot of things that have happened. So first of all, I have written to all ministers. Secondly, the State Archivist wrote to all ministers as well. So everybody is aware of their obligations now.
Prime Minister Bailey said yesterday that dealing with the issue were normal part of the political process. Is it normal for you to tell Cabinet to vote?
There is no voting at Cabinet. But there is no voting at Cabinet. The premise of your question is factually incorrect. No one votes at Cabinet. It's not like a parliament where you come in and take votes. Cabinet does not operate that way.
Did he push Mark Bailey to support that option A was discussed?
Well, I don't believe so, because I'll tell you how Cabinet works. Ministers have their Cabinet books, they read it, they think about it, and they come there and collectively we make decisions. Now, when there is legislation and other business that comes before Cabinet, and legislation is a good example, consultation happens on that. And it is actually good practice to consult with a whole range of stakeholders about what their views are. That is not an uncommon practice. But let me say very clearly, there is no voting at Cabinet. There never has been and there never will be. That is not how Cabinet government operates. Well, no, because that's not how Cabinet operates. No, because there is stakeholder consultation. That is a hallmark of good government, to have stakeholder consultation. The LNP had no consultation. Bills were put in the middle of the night, they were rushed through Parliament without any consultation. And look where it got them. It is... Yeah, you can actually have consultation with a whole range of stakeholders.
Often at press conferences, you say you can't answer questions because matters are before cabinet. So how do an electrical trade union officials knowing what is going on before cabinet?
Because there is consultation that happens. So just because something comes into cabinet doesn't mean there hasn't been consultation on it. There may be, for example, we might be going out to have a particular review on something. We would actually engage with stakeholders to have a look at, what the parameters of that review may be. This is normal practice of government. They already have looked at it. You can have a look at, and if you go to the summary part, I think the last 8 pages are a CCC other matter, but if you go to the summary part of it in the first bit, it basically says here that they've actually been through all these things. Yes, the 87, the attachments, the emails that are attached.
The opposition argues in the press conference this morning, they say that the CCC is actually electoral practice there and they're calling this borderline bribery.
Well, I reject that.
The summary of that report also says that failure to provision of public records was deemed an attack on accountability of government.
And the practice has been fixed. The practice has been fixed. Yeah, and the minister has apologised probably I think 3 or 4 times now. Yeah. As I said, ministers consult with a whole range of stakeholders.
How wide was the consultation on this particular?
You'd have to ask him that. I've just read the emails. Okay.
Thanks everyone.
Yes. Yes, we.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll leave it there. The big announcement there is the cruise ships have been given the go-ahead. So that's going to start happening. So that's a big announcement that the Premier made. And of course, she's just dealing with the genos at the question time there. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's been wonderful having your company today. Before we finish off today, we will take a very quick look at what's happening in the weekend. But don't forget that tomorrow we have a very special interview with Sudesh Kumar of Kapalia, which is the cyber security new startup we're venturing from Berkeley in USA, California, breaking markets into India and globally. So Sudesh will be here in the studios talking to you about that. That's coming tomorrow at 10 a.m. For now, let's take a look at the functions and events happening here in Brisbane. So there you are, ladies and gentlemen, the functions and events taking place right here in Brisbane. And for all other the things that you need to check out, you can always go onto our website, the Australian Indian Radio or the Brisbane Indian Times. And if you're subscribing to the EDM, which is which goes out every Friday, if you are not on the list, all you need to do is email us, and you can be on the list, and you'll be notified of all the functions and events taking place right here in Brisbane over the weekend. So you can plan your weekend and look at all. Of course, we know that there's lots of Holi functions and events that are taking place. And with that, I'd like to wish everyone all the very best for Holi, and may the true spirit of Holi prevail, and that we stick to the true values that Holi is about. Until tomorrow, it's goodbye from me.